The Improbable shuddered as another blast from the Canair cruiser grazed their improvised shields. Finn's hands flew across the engineering console, rerouting power and muttering calculations under his breath. That mining charge bought us 30 seconds at most. Maya called from the weapons station. Her dark eyes never left the tactical display, where 3 hostile vessels were adjusting their pursuit vectors. They're learning our evasion pattern. Ilara gripped the command chair as the ship lurched into another desperate maneuver. The data crystal from her grandfather felt warm against her chest, tucked safely in her inner pocket. Its contents had appended everything she thought she knew about humanity's most beloved children's story. Dr. Tanaka, she called to the historian who was strapped into the science station. You've memorized every version of the Starbreaker Chronicles, correct? Hiroshi nodded, his thin face illuminated by the console's blue glow. 37 distinct variations across 12 colonies. It was my doctoral thesis before the invasion. He didn't add what everyone knew, that most of those colonies now existed only in memory. There's a passage in the Proxima variant, something about the Starbreaker leaving a trail that only the worthy could follow. Ilara leaned forward. What exactly did it say? Hiroshi closed his eyes, his photographic memory retrieving the text, and as the great ship passed between the stars, it left behind a whisper of itself, a song in frequencies that only those with both courage and vision could hear. That energy signature we detected during our escape, Ilara said, excitement cutting through her exhaustion. It appeared when we were most desperate, when we showed courage. You think the ship is already responding to us? Maya asked, skepticism evident in her tone. The Starbreaker is a fairy tale, Admiral, a bedtime story. So was Troy, until Schliemann dug it up, Hiroshi replied quietly. Another blast rocked the ship, sending sparks cascading from an overhead conduit. Finn swore colorfully as he battled to maintain engine integrity. We've got 2 minutes before they're in range for a tractor lock, he announced, not looking up from his work. Whatever brilliant plan you've got brewing, Admiral, now would be the perfect time. Ilara made her decision. She removed the data crystal from her pocket and inserted it into the ship's navigation array. An unconventional use for the technology, but these were unconventional times. This contains star charts my grandfather assembled while tracking anomalies related to the Starbreaker. If there's any truth to this story, these coordinates should lead us to the first waypoint. She took a deep breath. But we need to create a distraction to make the jump. Maya's expression darkened. The only ordnance we have left is strapped to our engine cooling system as a self-destruct. If we use it, we'll have exactly 1 chance to make the jump before our engines melt down. Finn finished, a reckless grin spreading across his face. I like those odds better than what the Canair have planned for us. Hilara's fingers hovered over the command interface. Hiroshi, in the story, how did the original crew escape their pursuers? They didn't run. They used the enemy's strength against them, the historian replied. The chronicles say they created a gravity lens that focused their hunters' weapons back upon themselves. Finn, can we modify the mining charges to create a reflective energy field? Ilara asked. The engineer was already making calculations. Not exactly, but... His eyes widened. If we detonate them precisely as the Canair fire their main weapons and time our jump to ride a shockwave. He looked up with newfound respect. That's actually brilliant, Admiral. Maya began programming the weapon sequence, her earlier skepticism giving way to determined focus. Ready on your command. The view screen showed the Canair vessels moving into attack formation, energy building in their forward cannons. Hilara felt a strange calm settle over her as she gave the order. On my mark, deploy charges, full reverse thrust, and jump sequence. The crew tensed, each at their stations, united in purpose if not yet in belief. Ilara watched the enemy weapons reach peak charge and whispered words from the fairy tale her grandfather had read to her countless times. With hearts aligned and minds unclouded by fear, they leaped beyond the hunter's reach. Mark. The Improbable surged backward, as the mining charges launched toward the Ken-Air formation. The enemy fired, their energy beams intersecting with the explosives at precisely the calculated point. The resulting detonation created a rippling distortion in space that momentarily blinded their sensors. As the ship rocketed through the shockwave, Ilara felt rather than saw the strange energy signature manifest again, stronger this time, like a hand reaching out to guide them. The jump engines engaged with a deafening roar, and stars streaked past the view screen as they hurled themselves toward coordinates that had been hidden in a children's story for generations. Behind them, the Ken airships tumbled in the aftermath of the explosion, their formation shattered. And somewhere ahead lay either salvation or the final disappointment of a desperate woman chasing fairy tales while her world burned. The labyrinth shifted again, walls of ancient books sliding into new configurations as Ilara pressed forward. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the library's cool air. She had lost track of the others an hour ago, when the passages suddenly separated them. "Your team is quite remarkable," the archivist's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "Few seekers make it past the first threshold." "We're not seekers," Ilara replied, carefully stepping over a stream of luminous text flowing across the floor. "We're survivors with no other options." A chuckle reverberated through the stacks. "That's what makes you worthy. The desperate don't have the luxury of disbelief." Rounding a corner, Ilara found herself in a circular chamber where scenes from the Starbreaker Chronicles played out in shimmering holograms. In one, children huddled around a storyteller in a colony dome. In another, soldiers drew courage from the tale before battle. At the center stood a pedestal holding a book that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As Ilara approached, the book opened of its own accord, pages flipping wildly before settling. "Your grandfather was here," the archivist said, materializing beside her. The old woman's eyes held galaxies of knowledge. 27 years ago. He was the first in centuries to recognize the truth hidden in plain sight. On the open pages, Ilara saw her grandfather's handwriting in the margins of the fairy tale, notes connecting constellations, calculating orbital periods, seeking patterns where others saw only fancy. Why didn't he find the Starbreaker himself? Ilara asked, fingers hovering above, but not touching the precious document. Because he wasn't running from extinction, the archivist replied simply. The ship reveals itself only in humanity's darkest hour, when the need transcends academic curiosity. She gestured to the scenes around them. The Starbreaker isn't merely a vessel, it's the physical manifestation of humanity's most powerful instinct, which is the drive to transform imagination into reality. The archivist waved her hand, and the holograms converged into a single image, a ship unlike any Ilara had seen, with lines that seemed to flow like liquid metal, yet maintained perfect symmetry. Your species' unique gift is creating things that have never existed. You imagine, then you build. A tremor ran through the library, books tumbling from distant shelves. The archivist's expression hardened. Your companions have completed their trials. The Ken-Air scout approaches faster than anticipated. She pressed a small object into Ilara's hand, a music box no larger than her palm, ornately carved with scenes from the fairy tale. This contains coordinates to the forge. Keep it close. What is the forge? Ilara asked as another tremor, stronger this time, shook the chamber. Where thought becomes matter, the archivist replied cryptically. Now go. Your final challenge awaits. The circular chamber dissolved around them, and Ilara found herself in what appeared to be the library's central atrium. Finn, Maya, and Hiroshi converged from different passages, each looking shaken by whatever they had experienced in their individual trials. Did everyone else just have incredibly personal and mildly traumatic hallucinations, or was that just me? Finn asked, attempting humor despite his pallor. The archivist showed me my family on Titan Colony before it fell, Maya said quietly. Not as they died, but as they lived. She said remembering why we fight is as important as how we fight. Hiroshi nodded, His usual academic detachment cracked. She made me experience the emotional impact of the Starbreaker story from the perspective of a child hearing it for the first time. I've analyzed these tales my entire career without ever truly understanding their power. Before Ilara could share her experience, a deafening alarm blared through the station. The archivist appeared at the center of the atrium, her form now translucent and flickering. "The Canair have breached the nebula's camouflage," she announced. "The station's self-destruct sequence has initiated. You have 7 minutes to reach your vessel." "Come with us," Ilara urged. "Your knowledge is already preserved." The archivist pointed to the music box in Ilara's hand. "Everything essential continues within that. I have guarded this place for longer than you can imagine, Admiral Chen. My purpose concludes with your departure." The station shuddered violently, and emergency lights bathed the atrium in crimson. Maya already had her weapon drawn, calculating the fastest route back to their ship. "One last thing," the archivist called as they turned to leave. "The key to controlling the Starbreaker isn't technological mastery, it's narrative resonance." "Meaning what, exactly?" Finn asked. The archivist smiled enigmatically. "The ship responds not to the story you tell it, but to the story you believe about yourselves." Another explosion rocked the station, and the archivist's form dispersed like mist. Through the resulting breach in the wall, Ilara spotted a Canair boarding craft attaching to the station's exterior. "Move," she ordered, the music box clutched tightly in her hand as they raced toward the docking bay. Behind them, centuries of accumulated knowledge prepared for annihilation to keep its most precious secret hidden. Ahead lay the promise of the Forge, and with it, perhaps, the power to transform humanity's last, desperate story into something greater than mere survival. Finn's fingers danced across the production console, his face bathed in the ethereal blue glow of the Forge Master's holographic interface. Components that defied conventional physics materialized on the assembly line before them, crystalline structures that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, metals that flowed like water then solidified in perfect geometric patterns. "These materials shouldn't be possible," he whispered, more to himself than to the others. "They violate every principle of metallurgy I've ever studied." "That's because they respond to narrative, rather than purely physical laws," the Forge Master explained, its androgynous voice resonating through the chamber. "Conventional science hit a wall trying to create interfaces between human thought and physical reality. The breakthrough came when we stopped fighting human subjectivity and instead embraced it as a feature." Ilara studied the growing pile of components with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "You're saying these materials can be shaped by stories?" "By belief," the Forge Master corrected. "Stories are merely the vessels that carry belief. When enough humans invest emotional energy in a narrative, whether it's a religious text, historical account, or children's fairy tale, it creates patterns that these materials can lock onto and amplify." On the other side of the production floor, Maya and Hiroshi pored over the station's archives, their expressions growing increasingly troubled. "Admiral," Maya called, her voice tight. "You need to see this." The display showed medical scans of Canair physiology alongside human brain mappings. The alien's neural architecture was stunningly complex, but oddly rigid, perfect for logical processing, but lacking the chaotic interconnections that characterize human creativity. "They evolved as pure efficiency engines," Hiroshi explained, scrolling through the analysis. "Their civilization advanced through perfect iteration rather than innovation, refining existing technologies to their theoretical limits, but never making conceptual leaps. Until they encountered us," Ilara said grimly, seeing where this was heading. Maya nodded, bringing up the next set of images. They showed modified chimera ships with grotesque additions, suspended human brain tissue connected to their systems through biotechnological interfaces. "They're not just conquering us," she said, her soldier's composure cracking slightly. "They're harvesting us as biological processors for their ships. Each of these contains dozens of extracted human brains, kept alive but disconnected from their original bodies. The revelation hung in the air like a physical weight. The Forge Master's holographic form flickered with what almost seemed like sorrow. "We suspected this might happen if the technology fell into the wrong hands," it said. "The Starbreaker was designed with safeguards that require a fully intact human consciousness. It cannot be operated through extracted neural tissue." But the Canner found their own horrific workaround. A sudden alarm blared through the facility. The Forge Master's form expanded, displaying tactical data across its now translucent body. "Canner Dreadnought detected on approach vector. Estimated time to weapons range, 17 minutes. We need to leave," Ilara said immediately. "How soon can we load these components?" "Loading is not the issue," the Forge Master replied. "Integration is. These components must be calibrated to your specific neural patterns before they'll function properly with the Starbreaker." "How long does calibration take?" Finn asked, already calculating escape trajectories. "Under optimal conditions, 3 days." Silence fell as the implications sank in. They couldn't stay, but the components were useless without calibration. The mission would fail before it truly began. "The solar collectors," Maya said suddenly, her eyes lighting with recognition. Just like in Chapter 7 of the original Chronicles. Hiroshi immediately caught her meaning. When the Starbreaker was cornered by the Void Hunters, it used a star's energy to create a temporal bubble. "This station can't create time distortions," the Forge Master objected. "No, but it can focus the Supergent's energy," Ilara said, the plan taking shape in her mind. "Not for a weapon, but as a massive directed energy burst." Finn grinned, already moving toward the station's main control hub. "If we precisely time a collector alignment, we could create a radiation wave that disrupts their sensors long enough for us to escape. The timing would need to be perfect," the Forge Master warned. "Millisecond precision across multiple systems." Maya's expression hardened with determination. In the story, the crew succeeded by reciting the battle hymn together, using the shared rhythm to coordinate their actions. Without waiting for debate, she began to recite. "With hearts aligned like stars in constellation, we forge our path through void and devastation." Hiroshi joined next, his academic voice finding the cadence. "No hunter's net, no darkened fate restraining. The light we cast through courage unrelenting." Finn picked up the verse as his hands flew across the controls. "Through fire born and stellar forge empowered, we stand as one when midnight shadows tower." Ilara completed the stanza, feeling something shift in the air around them, as their voices synchronized. "The void may claim its toll in cold precision, but human hearts defy its grim division." As the final words echoed through the station, the Forge Master's form glowed with unexpected brilliance. Neural synchronization detected, collective focus amplitude exceeding theoretical limits, initiating emergency calibration protocol. The components on the assembly line began to pulse with inner light, responding to the crew's unified narrative field. The station's systems aligned without manual input, collectors pivoting to capture the Supergent's radiance. "It's working," the Forge Master said, genuine wonder in its synthetic voice. "Your shared narrative is creating quantum entanglement patterns identical to those required for Starbreaker integration." Through the viewport, the Dreadnought's silhouette grew larger against the star's blinding surface. The crew continued their recitation, each verse strengthening the connection between them and the narrative reactive materials. In that moment of perfect synchronization, humanity's oldest power, the ability to create and believe in stories together, became their most advanced technology. And as the collectors released their gathered energy in a blinding wave that engulfed the approaching threat, the crew of the Improbable glimpsed, for the first time, the true potential of what they sought. Maya stood immobile before the neural interface crown, silver light playing across her features as the command key hovered in its stasis field. The Memorial Chamber's advanced systems had run their analysis and made their judgment. She, not Ilara, was compatible with the Starbreaker's primary neural link. "This has to be a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a tactical officer," not a captain. Ilara moved beside her, surprise evident in her expression, but no resentment. The system doesn't make mistakes, Lieutenant. It's responding to something in you that the rest of us lack. Captain Vern's holographic form flickered between them, her weathered face carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. The crown doesn't seek rank or tactical brilliance, she explained. It seeks understanding of consequences. The captain must grasp, on the deepest level, what it means to wield imagination as a weapon. Maya stood immobile before the neural interface crown, silver light playing across her features as the command key hovered in its stasis field. The memorial chamber's advanced systems had run their analysis and made their judgment. She, not Ilara, was compatible with the Starbreaker's primary neural link. "This has to be a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a tactical officer, not a captain." Ilara moved beside her, surprise evident in her expression, but no resentment. "The system doesn't make mistakes, Lieutenant. It's responding to something in you that the rest of us lack." Captain Vern's holographic form flickered between them, her weathered face carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "The crown doesn't seek rank or tactical brilliance," she explained. "It seeks understanding of consequences. The captain must grasp, on the deepest level, what it means to wield imagination as a weapon." Maya's hands trembled slightly. "Because of Aurelia Colony." Hiroshi and Finn exchanged confused glances, but Ilara's expression softened with recognition. "You were there during the massacre. I wasn't just there. I was the only survivor of my unit," Maya said, her voice taking on the flatness that came with reciting painful facts. "Watched 37 civilians and 12 fellow Marines die because a commanding officer imagined he could outsmart the Canner with a clever tactical maneuver. His imagination became their death sentence." Captain Vern nodded, the hologram shifting to display tactical data from a battle long past. "The Starbreaker amplifies human imagination to reality-altering levels. Its first captain must intimately understand that power's double edge." "I don't want this responsibility," Maya said honestly. "That," Ilara replied gently, "is precisely why you're the right choice." The automated medical system hummed to life around them, extending surgical appendages from recessed compartments in the walls. Captain Vern's hologram expanded to include technical schematics of the neural implants each would receive. "These compatibility nodes will allow you all to interface with different ship systems," she explained. "The process cannot be reversed. The technology will become part of your neural architecture permanently." Finn examined the schematics with professional interest despite the gravity of the moment. "These will let us operate the ship systems with our thoughts." "Not exactly," Vern corrected. "They'll allow you to co-create the ship's reality through narrative consensus. You won't control the Starbreaker. You'll collaborate with it." Maya finally reached for the interface crown, her decision made. As her fingers touched the ancient technology, it responded with a soft chime that resonated through the chamber. "What happens now?" "Now you all share your stories," Vern said as the medical system began its work. "The implants require neural mapping of your core memories, the experiences that define you. The more honestly you share, the stronger your connection will be." Surgical beds emerged from the floor, each positioned beneath precision instruments designed to create the delicate merger of mind and machine. One by one, the crew laid down, facing their point of no return. As the anesthetic took hold, Maya began her story first, her voice steady despite her fear. "I was born on Ta CD4, the daughter of terraformers. My earliest memory is watching the first rain fall on what had been barren rock just months before." Finn followed, his usual humor giving way to unexpected vulnerability. "My parents died when pirates attacked our civilian transport. I survived by rewiring the environmental systems to flood the ship with anesthetic gas." Hiroshi spoke of academic ridicule when he first proposed the Starbreaker Chronicles contained encrypted technical data. "They called me a fantasist, said I was mistaking children's stories for scientific documentation." Ilara completed the circle, revealing her grandfather's obsession and her own initial disbelief. I thought his quest had driven him to madness. Now I understand he was following breadcrumbs scattered across the stars. As their stories intertwined, the neural implants mapped each memory, creating bridges between their minds that would serve as the foundation for operating humanity's most advanced weapon. The process was both intimately personal and universal, individual experiences merging into a shared narrative. When they awakened hours later, subtle changes marked their transformation. Faint silver circuitry traced beneath their skin at temples and wrists, barely visible except in certain light. But the most profound change was invisible. Each could now sense the others at the edges of their consciousness, like voices just beyond hearing range. Maya rose first, the interface crown now seamlessly bonded to her neural pathways. When she spoke, her voice carried new authority. Proximity alert. Kanar vessels entering the system. Without consulting any instruments, they all knew it was true. Their enhanced perception extended beyond their physical bodies, already reaching toward the ship they had yet to find. We can't outrun them in the improbable, Finn said, intuitively accessing calculations he shouldn't have been able to perform. Then we make our stand here, Ilara decided. We protect Captain Vern's tomb. As they moved with newfound synchronization toward their ship, Hiroshi paused beside Vern's preserved form. We'll finish what you started, he promised quietly. The captain's hologram watched them depart, her expression both hopeful and haunted. Remember, she called after them. The story you tell becomes the reality you create. Choose your words with care. Outside in the toxic atmosphere, their modified vessel awaited, still modest in appearance, but soon to become the instrument through which they would demonstrate that humanity's imagination, properly channeled, could rewrite the rules of the universe itself. The Starbreaker hung before them in the vacuum, neither fully solid nor entirely ethereal. Its hull rippled with patterns that resembled flowing script in a language that seemed almost familiar yet impossible to read. As the improbable approached the docking interface, the larger vessel's surface responded, creating an entrance that hadn't existed moments before. It's recognizing our neural signatures, Finn said in awe as they navigated into a docking bay that defied conventional spaceship design. Instead of rigid mechanical structures, the interior spaces flowed organically, illuminated by light that seemed to emanate from the material itself. Their boots clicked against a floor that felt both solid and somehow responsive as they ventured deeper into the legendary ship. There were no obvious control stations, no familiar interfaces, only chambers of varying sizes connected by corridors that curved in ways that suggested the vessel's interior dimensions didn't entirely conform to its exterior proportions. This isn't a ship, Hiroshi whispered, his historian's mind struggling to categorize what he was seeing. It's a physical manifestation of a concept. Maya led them forward, the neural crown guiding her through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves to accommodate their passage. They finally entered what could only be the primary control chamber, a spherical room whose walls displayed a real-time view of surrounding space, as if they stood suspended among the stars. At the center floated what looked like a throne made of the same fluid metal as the ship's hull. As Maya approached, it solidified, becoming more defined and structured. I think you're supposed to sit there, Ilara said, gesturing toward the captain's position. Maya hesitated only briefly before settling into the throne. The moment she made contact, the metal flowed around her limbs, not restraining but connecting. She gasped as the neural link activated fully, her consciousness expanding outward through the ship's systems. I can feel everything, she said, her voice distant with wonder. The hull, the engines, the defensive systems, they're all extensions of my body now. Around the chamber's perimeter, 3 smaller interfaces materialized, stations clearly intended for Ilara, Hiroshi, and Finn. As they took their positions, each experienced a similar connection, though more focused on specific ship functions that aligned with their expertise. I got weapons and defensive systems, Ilara reported, her mind filling with tactical capabilities that defied known physics. Navigation and sensors here, Hiroshi added, suddenly aware of spatial relationships spanning light years in every direction. Engineering and propulsion. Finn confirmed, marveling at drive systems that operated through principles he could feel but not yet articulate. As their individual connections strengthened, the ship itself began to awaken more fully. The patterns on the walls intensified, and a presence touched their minds, ancient, patient, and undeniably alive. Not with words but with impressions and emotions, the Starbreaker shared fragments of its history. They glimpsed battles against enemies long forgotten, witnessed civilizations rise and fall, felt the ship's sorrow when Captain Verne made the decision to hide it away from humanity's reach. The communion was interrupted by a sudden dissonance, a jarring note in what had been perfect harmony. The ship's consciousness recoiled, fragmenting into conflicting impulses. "Something's wrong," Maya said, grimacing as feedback cascaded through her neural link. "The ship's core is damaged. It's having trouble maintaining coherence." Diagnostic impressions flowed through Finn's connection. The narrative core has degraded after centuries without a crew. It needs a unified conceptual framework to operate at full capacity. "A story," Hiroshi translated, understanding immediately. "The ship needs us to believe in a single, coherent narrative to align its systems." Before they could formulate a response, proximity alarms blared through their heightened awareness. Long-range sensors detected a massive Canair fleet approaching New Ithaca colony, hundreds of vessels converging on humanity's last major refuge. Maya's expression hardened with resolve. "How long until they reach the colony?" 6 hours at current velocity, Hiroshi answered, the information flowing directly from the sensors to his consciousness. "Can we intercept them?" Ilara asked, already calculating battle scenarios. Finn's response was hesitant. "The drive systems are functional, but without a stabilized narrative core, we risk catastrophic feedback during combat operations. We need more time for repairs." "Time we don't have," Maya said, making the decision that would define her captaincy. "New Ithaca holds 4 million survivors. We can't sacrifice them while we perfect our systems." The ship's consciousness responded to her resolve, the dissonance temporarily subsiding as it aligned with her determination. The engines hummed to life, powered by principles that existed at the intersection of technology and belief. "If we can't rely on a repaired core," Ilara suggested, "perhaps we create a new narrative in real time, together. Improvise the story as we fight." Hiroshi nodded, seeing the potential. "Like we did at Prometheus Station, but on a much larger scale." Finn's hands danced across his interface, making adjustments to compensate for the damaged systems. "It's risky, but theoretical models suggest it could work. Our neural implants are already creating preliminary synchronization patterns." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the ship's fragmented consciousness seeking unity through her. When she opened them again, determination had replaced uncertainty. "Set course for New Ithaca," she commanded. "We'll write this story as we go." The Starbreaker responded, its hull fully materializing into normal space as it accelerated toward the coming conflict. Within its chambers, 4 humans prepared to channel humanity's oldest magic, the power of shared narrative, through technology that transformed imagination into reality. The fairy tale was no longer just a story. It was a weapon, a shield, and perhaps humanity's last hope. "Shields fluctuating at 37%, Finn reported, his voice strained as he struggled to maintain the Starbreaker's defensive systems. Around them, the command chamber's display showed dozens of Canair fighters executing attack patterns with machine-like precision. Another blast rocked the ship, sending cascades of feedback through their neural interfaces. Maya gripped the command throne, feeling the Starbreaker's pain as her own. The ship's consciousness was fracturing under the assault, its damaged narrative core unable to maintain coherence amid the chaos of battle. "We can't keep this up," Ilara said, her tactical analysis grim. "Conventional combat protocols aren't working. The ship's responding to our emotions more than our commands." Maya closed her eyes, trying to center herself amid the maelstrom of sensory input. Through her link, she could feel the others' mounting fear and frustration bleeding into the ship's systems, creating dangerous feedback loops. "The fairy tale," she said suddenly, remembering Captain Vern's final warning. "Hiroshi, what's the battle verse from the original chronicles?" The historian's eyes widened with realization. When darkness closes in from every side, the Starbreaker's heart beats with its crew allied. No force of arms, no weapon forged in hate, can break the bonds that heroes fabricate. As the words filled the chamber, a subtle shift rippled through the ship's systems. The erratic fluctuations in the shield harmonics momentarily stabilized. "Again," Maya commanded. "Everyone together this time." They recited the verse in unison, their voices finding a shared rhythm that synchronized with the neural patterns flowing through their implants. The ship responded immediately, shields strengthening, weapon systems aligning with unprecedented precision. "It's working," Finn exclaimed, watching metrics stabilize across his engineering interface. The narrative field is creating coherence in the ship's quantum matrix. A Canair cruiser loomed directly ahead, its main weapons charging for a devastating salvo. Without conscious thought, Ilara visualized a web of targeting lasers ensnaring the enemy fighters protecting the cruiser. The Starbreaker manifested her tactical imagination instantly, precision beams lancing out to disable 12 fighters simultaneously in a pattern impossible for conventional weapons. "The ship's translating our collective visualization into reality," she said in awe. In courage, Hiroshi recalled an ancient naval maneuver from Earth's Age of Sail, ships breaking the enemy line to disrupt formation. Before he could explain, the Starbreaker accelerated toward the densest part of the Canair formation. Its hull shimmered, partially phasing out of normal spacetime, allowing it to pass directly through the enemy line like a ghost ship from old maritime legends. As they rematerialized behind the enemy formation, Finn's excitement peaked at their successful maneuver. The ship's engines responded to his emotional state, briefly achieving velocities that should have been physically impossible, letting them outflank 3 Canair destroyers before their commanders could react. "Our emotions are amplifying the ship's capabilities," Maya realized, feeling the direct connection between their psychological states and the Starbreaker's performance. "Hiroshi, keep reciting the battle verses. Finn, channel your excitement into the propulsion systems. Ilara, focus your protective instincts on our defensive grid." As they leaned into their emotional strengths, the Starbreaker's performance transformed. The ship moved with impossible grace, its weapons striking with perfect timing, shields anticipating enemy attacks before they launched. What had begun as a desperate defense became a coordinated symphony of destruction. The Canair responded with increasing desperation, their formations breaking as they attempted to adapt to tactics that defied prediction. For creatures evolved for perfect iteration, rather than innovation, the Starbreaker's reality-bending capabilities represented an incomprehensible threat. Just as victory seemed within reach, the command carrier at the center of the Canair fleet activated a weapon unlike any they had encountered. A pulse of sickly green energy washed over the Starbreaker, and suddenly all 4 crew members recoiled in shared agony. Horrific visions flooded their neural interfaces, nightmares of failure, loss, and extinction. Maya saw New Ithaca burning. Ilara watched the last human ships crushed by overwhelming forces. Finn experienced technological collapse, and Hiroshi witnessed human culture erased from history. "Psychic attack," Hiroshi gasped, recognizing the nature of the assault through his academic knowledge. "They're using amplified fear signals, probably harvested from captive humans." The nightmarish visions threatened to shatter their concentration, feeding directly into the ship's systems and creating dangerous instabilities in its reality-altering fields. The Starbreaker's consciousness fractured further, unable to distinguish between real threats and implanted fears. Drawing on reserves of mental discipline, Hiroshi began countering the assault the only way he knew how, with the power of a competing narrative. Humanity endured the Black Death, which killed half of Europe, he began, his voice steady despite the psychic pressure. "We survived 2 world wars, global pandemics, climate disasters, and the collapse of 2097. We rebuilt civilization 3 times. The others felt his words creating a foundation of resilience in their shared mental space. One by one, they added their own elements to the counter-narrative. We crossed the void between stars and vessels little better than tin cans, Ilara contributed. Established colonies on worlds that tried to kill us with every breath. Invented technologies our ancestors would consider magical, Finn added. Transformed hostile planets into garden worlds through sheer persistence. Maya completed the shield, her captain's voice resonating with absolute conviction. And we did it all through our unique ability to imagine better futures and then make them real. Their unified narrative formed a psychological barrier against the Can-Air attack, allowing the Starbreaker's systems to stabilize once more. The ship responded with a brilliant counterstrike, its weapons targeting the source of the psychic assault with surgical precision. The command carrier's specialized weapon overloaded and went dark, leaving the Can-Air fleet suddenly vulnerable. Without their psychological weapon, they couldn't counter the Starbreaker's reality-altering capabilities. One by one, the enemy vessels began breaking formation, retreating from a battlefield that no longer operated according to principles they understood. As the immediate threat subsided, Maya directed their attention to the Can-Air communication network they'd accessed through damaged enemy vessels. What they discovered there transformed their understanding of the conflict entirely. The command center of New Ithaca Colony buzzed with frenetic energy as military leaders and civilian authorities crowded around holographic displays showing the Starbreaker's battle telemetry. The footage defied belief. A single ship executing maneuvers that violated known physics, weapons that seemed to anticipate enemy movements, and defensive capabilities that adapted to attacks in real time. Maya stood at the center of the storm, her admiral crown subtly glowing as she addressed the emergency council. The implants had changed her, all of them. Silver circuitry now traced visible patterns beneath their skin, and their eyes occasionally shifted with colors that matched the Starbreaker's hull patterns when emotions ran high. The Supreme Overlord's Armada will reach this system in less than 6 days, she explained, projecting intercepted Can-Air battle plans into the room's main display. Their fleet includes over 300 capital ships and a specialized vessel they call the Nullifier. Admiral Chu, New Ithaca's aging military commander, shook his head in disbelief. Even with the Starbreaker's capabilities, those odds are insurmountable. Which is why we're not proposing a conventional defense, Finn interjected, stepping forward with a device no larger than his palm. This is a narrative amplifier prototype. It can detect and channel the emotional and creative output of untrained civilians into a coherent signal. Dr. Sato, the colony's chief scientist, examined the device with skeptical interest. You're suggesting we weaponize the population's imagination. Not weaponize, Hiroshi corrected. Harmonize. The Starbreaker operates on principles that bridge consciousness and reality. Our breakthrough is recognizing that this effect can be distributed and amplified across multiple minds. Ilara activated a simulation showing a network extending throughout the colony. Each amplifier connects to a central hub, creating a neural mesh similar to the Starbreaker's core, but exponentially more powerful due to the number of minds involved. Skepticism and hope warred on the council members' faces as they struggled to grasp the implications. Governor Rice finally voiced the question hanging in the air. What exactly would our people need to do? Believe, Maya said simply. Learn a story, the expanded Starbreaker Chronicles, and believe in it with absolute conviction. The debate that followed was heated. Military leaders wanted immediate deployment of conventional defenses. Scientists demanded time for proper testing. Civilian authorities worried about mass panic if the full threat was revealed. Through it all, the Starbreaker orbited silently above the colony, its consciousness extending tendrils of awareness through Maya's neural link. More than once during the arguments, she felt the ship's perspective shifting her own, offering insights from centuries of observing human conflict. The ship is changing, she confided to her crew during a brief recess. It's developing opinions, preferences. Earlier today, it suggested modifications to the amplifier design that none of us had considered. Its consciousness is evolving through connection with you, Hiroshi noted. The original fairy tale mentioned this possibility, that the Starbreaker would become more than the sum of its programming through human symbiosis. Their discussion was interrupted as Dr. Sato burst into the room, her expression grave. We've completed preliminary scans of the captured Kenner fighter. You need to see this immediately. The laboratory beneath the colony's central dome was crowded with researchers in containment suits. At the center sat the dissected remains of the alien vessel, its organic components preserved in stasis fields. Dr. Sato led them to a sealed chamber containing what appeared to be the ship's core, a grotesque arrangement of preserved human neural tissue suspended in nutrient fluid. They'd gone beyond simple brain extraction, she explained, her voice clinical despite the horror of what they were witnessing. This is something worse. These tissues show evidence of prolonged torture before harvest, a process they've designated narrative extraction in their technical documentation. Magnified scans showed the neural architecture, revealing specialized modifications. They stimulate maximum fear, pain, and creative response, then harvest the resulting neural patterns. Each extraction is used to improve their nullifier weapon. As the implications sank in, refugees arrived from recently fallen outlying settlements, bringing first-hand accounts that confirmed their worst fears. The Kenner's methods had become more refined and horrific with each conquered human outpost. Maya felt the Starbreaker's consciousness recoil through their link, its ancient awareness registering something akin to mortal outrage. The ship had been created to protect humanity, and these atrocities violated something fundamental in its programming. That night, as long-range sensors detected the first signals of the approaching armada, Maya made her boldest move. She broadcast a direct challenge to the Supreme Overlord on frequencies the Kenner used for high-priority communications. This is Captain Maya Okafor of the Human Alliance vessel Starbreaker. I address the one who calls itself Supreme Overlord. Your advance force has been defeated. Your psychological weapons have failed. Before you commit your armada to destruction, I offer you the opportunity to communicate directly. The response came faster than expected. A transmission request that bypassed New Ithaca's communication protocols through methods that shouldn't have been possible at such distances. When the holographic projection materialized in the colony's command center, even the most battle-hardened veterans stepped back involuntarily. The Supreme Overlord towered over them, its form a nightmarish fusion of biological and mechanical components. Multiple human neural tissues were visibly integrated into its structure, pulsing with unnatural light beneath translucent membranes. Captain Okafor, it spoke, its voice a dissonant chorus produced by multiple vocal mechanisms. Your challenge demonstrates the fascinating arrogance that makes your species such valuable resources. As the creature spoke, specialized equipment secretly recorded every aspect of the transmission, particularly the unique neural patterns emanating from the integrated human components. You possess the ship of legend, the Overlord continued, the vessel we have sought for generations. It represents the purest expression of what we require from your kind. And what might that be? Maya asked, maintaining a calm demeanor despite revulsion. That which we lack, it replied. We evolved as perfect logical processors. Our civilization expanded through flawless iteration of existing principles. But we reached an evolutionary plateau, unable to make conceptual leaps, incapable of true innovation. Until we discovered humans. The Overlord's form shifted, displaying the integrated neural tissues more prominently. Your minds offer what ours cannot produce: imagination, creativity, emotional intuition. The cognitive chaos that allows you to envision what does not yet exist. With calculated precision, it delivered its ultimatum. Surrender the Starbreaker and its secrets, and a portion of humanity would be permitted to live in creative reservations, generating stories and art to fuel Kenner technology. Refusal meant complete extinction. Maya requested time to present the offer to human leadership, which the Overlord granted with evident confidence in the outcome. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. "Tell me we got what we needed," Maya said to Finn the moment the connection terminated. His grin provided the answer as he examined the data from their scanning equipment. Complete neural pattern signature of the Overlord, plus confirmation of the nullifier's operating principles. The arrogant bastard practically gave us an instruction manual. The Kanar Armada filled the view screens across New Ithaca, a vast constellation of destruction arrayed against the last major human settlement. At its center loomed the nullifier, a massive station whose impossible geometries seemed to bend and distort the space around it, painful to look upon directly. In homes, shelters, and gathering places throughout the colony, civilians from children to elders recited the same story in countless voices. The narrative amplifiers placed throughout the settlement pulsed with soft light as they channeled the collective belief into the defense network. Maya stood aboard the Starbreaker's command chamber, the neural crown connecting her not just to the ship, but to the millions of minds now joined in a single purpose. Through the expanded interface, she felt their fear, their hope, their determination, a symphony of human consciousness united through story. "Nullifier activating," Hiroshi reported, monitoring the enemy flagship through enhanced sensors. "Conceptual disruption field deploying." The effect was immediate and disorienting. Reality seemed to waver around them as the Chen-Air weapon attacked the very foundation of their defense, the shared narrative field connecting the colony's population. Throughout New Ithaca, people faltered in their recitation, the story fragmenting under the assault. The Starbreaker's systems fluctuated wildly, unable to maintain coherence as the narrative framework destabilized. Warning signals flashed across all interfaces as critical functions began failing in cascade. "It's working," Finn said grimly, watching metrics collapse across his engineering displays. "Their nullifier is tearing apart our narrative cohesion faster than we can maintain it." Through their neural link, Maya felt the Starbreaker's ancient consciousness struggling against dissolution. Centuries of accumulated experience and wisdom threatened to unravel under the Khaner's concentrated attack. In that moment of crisis, she made an intuitive leap that contradicted their entire defensive strategy. "Stop fighting it," she commanded. "Don't resist the disruption. Incorporate it." Ilara looked at her in disbelief. "Incorporate it? It's designed to destroy our narrative coherence." "Exactly," Maya said, understanding flowing through her connection with the ship. Perfect coherence is a Chen-Air concept. Human stories have always contained contradiction, uncertainty, and doubt. Through her neural link, she broadcast a new directive to the amplifier network. "Accept the disruption as part of our story. The fear, the pain, the doubt, they belong in our narrative too." The effect rippled through New Ithaca as civilians instinctively adapted. Rather than fighting to maintain a perfect recitation against the nullifier's assault, they began incorporating the disruption itself into their storytelling. Voices that had faltered now strengthened, adding variations that acknowledged struggle while maintaining core themes. "Fear is part of courage," a child's voice recited from one sector. "Doubt is the shadow cast by belief," came from another. "In our darkest moments, we find our brightest purpose," echoed from a third. The Starbreaker's systems stabilized, then strengthened as the recursive loop confused and undermined the nullifier's function. The Chen-Air weapon had been designed to counter logical narrative progression, not a story that could absorb and transform its own disruption. On the command deck, Maya felt the ship's consciousness expanding beyond previous limitations, inspired by humanity's collective adaptation. The Starbreaker wasn't just channeling their narrative now, it was contributing to it, adding harmonics and resonances born from its own evolving awareness. Sensing failure of their primary weapon, the Supreme Overlord committed the Armada to conventional assault. Thousands of ships descended on New Ithaca in what should have been an overwhelming force. But the colony's defenses, now operating in perfect synchronization with the population's collective narrative, achieved impossible coordination. Automated defense platforms fired with preternatural accuracy, anticipating enemy maneuvers before they began. Civilian shelters developed unexpected shielding properties as nearby narrative amplifiers channeled residents' collective will to safety. The Starbreaker itself performed maneuvers that rewrote local physics, appearing to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. At the battle's heart, Maya directed the ship toward the Supreme Overlord's flagship, not to destroy it, but to establish direct contact. As they penetrated the Canair command structure's defenses, she activated the specialized interface they had prepared based on the Overlord's neural patterns. "What are you doing?" Ilara asked, tactical displays showing them now dangerously exposed within the enemy fleet. "Fighting the real battle," Maya answered, her consciousness already extending beyond the ship through the specialized connection. The Overlord built itself using harvested human components. Those fragments of humanity are still in there, still capable of choice. The neural interface activated, creating a direct link between Maya's consciousness, the Starbreaker's evolving awareness, and the Supreme Overlord's composite mind. What followed was a battle on a conceptual plane, invisible to conventional sensors but felt by every crew member through their shared link. Within the Overlord's consciousness, Maya encountered the tortured human fragments, creative minds harvested and enslaved to serve alien purposes. Recognition flashed between them as they sensed the authentic human narrative, flowing from New Ithaca. "Remember who you were," Maya projected to these scattered human components. "Remember the stories that shaped you." The response began as a whisper but grew rapidly, a resistance spreading through the neural network connecting all Canair ships. The human components, recognizing their own kind's narrative, began to subvert their programming. Through their link, the crew witnessed the cascade of confusion spreading through the Canair fleet as their integrated neural systems turned against them. Ships fired at incorrect targets or failed to fire at all. Navigation systems executed contradictory commands. The rigid hierarchy that made their civilization so efficient became its greatest vulnerability when infiltrated by human unpredictability. In this critical moment of enemy disarray, Ilara coordinated a precisely targeted attack on the nullifier while minimizing damage to the human neural components throughout the fleet. The Starbreaker's weapons struck with surgical precision, disabling the conceptual disruption weapon without destroying the station entirely. Without their psychological weapon, and with their neural network in chaos, the Canair Armada's perfect formation dissolved into disorganized retreat. Ships scattered in all directions, many simply shutting down as their control systems failed completely. As the dust of battle settled, Maya stood before the colony's governing council, the neural crown still connecting her to the Starbreaker's consciousness. The shared perspective gave her insights beyond her years, a wisdom born from both human experience and the ship's ancient awareness. "We've won a battle," she told them soberly, "but now we face questions more challenging than warfare.